Welcome, brave souls, to another unsettling episode of our scary stories. I'm your guide through this labyrinth of dread, and tonight, we take you on an expedition into the human psyche itself. Fasten the bolts on your courage and douse your lights. Tonight, we traverse the ominous halls of a dwelling you'll wish you could forget, a place known only as the House of Eyes. Listen closely, for what you're about to hear may very well haunt your dreams forever. Are you ready? Let's begin. In the heart of a small college town, shrouded in unsettling tales and half-forgotten stories, sat a dimly lit bar named the Rusty Anchor. The walls were aged wood, tarnished by time and imbued with the scent of spilled beer and aged whiskey. Its flickering neon sign hummed in harmony with the low murmurs of the crowd. At a round table tucked into a corner, the amber glow of hanging light bulbs caressed the faces of four friends, amplifying the fervor in their eyes. Nathan sat with an air of relaxed authority, his eyes scanning the room with a kind of skepticism only a criminal justice major could possess. Beside him was Olivia, radiant and daring, her eyes often hidden behind the lens of her camera, capturing what she liked to call the spirit of the moment. Across the table were Mark and Sophia, twins bound not just by blood but also by an insatiable curiosity for the unexplained. Mark, with his wire-rimmed glasses, was the epitome of a tech geek, while Sophia, more pensive in demeanor, aimed to dissect the complexities of the human psyche as a psychology major. Come on, Nathan. It's the last weekend before finals. Don't you want to do something adventurous? Sophia swirled the ice in her drink, her tone half challenging, half playful. Nathan looked hesitant. Adventurous is one thing. Breaking and entering into an abandoned mansion is another. I agree with Sophia, Olivia interjected. She leaned in, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. It's like stepping into a living photograph, a frozen moment in time. Plus, it would make for some amazing pictures. Mark, not needing any more encouragement, took out his smartphone and showed them a grainy image. Here, look at this. They say it's the last picture ever taken of the place. You can almost feel the aura of mystery around it. The picture showed an imposing mansion cloaked in darkness, its structure distorted by the vines and the shadows, an emblem of both grandiosity and decay. But you all know the stories, right? About the so-called House of Eyes. Nathan questioned, still not convinced. Sophia nodded, exactly why I want to go. Think about it. What better way to study fear than to confront it head-on? It's not just folklore, it's a psychological experiment. Mark joined in. And besides, who knows? Maybe we'll debunk the myth. It could be nothing more than an old, decrepit building. Nathan sighed, looking into the eyes of each of his friends. They were the same eyes he had known for years, but tonight they were tinged with a hunger for the unexplored, an allure he found difficult to resist. Fine, Nathan said, relenting. But if we're doing this, we do it smart. We tell someone where we're going, and we stick together. Agreed. Agreed, they chimed in unison, their voices mingling with the bar's smoky air, and becoming part of its fabric of whispered conversations and lingering tales. Little did they know that their pact, sealed in the comfort of friendship and dim lighting, would soon lead them into the haunting darkness, to a place where walls didn't just have ears but eyes that saw too much, and mouths that never spoke. As they got up from the table, laughter and excitement cloaking their apprehension, the rusty anchor hanging on the wall of the bar seemed to creak almost imperceptibly, as if warning them of the depth into which they were about to plunge. For now, the night was young and full of promises. But promises, like whispered legends, have a way of becoming real, especially in a town where darkness lurked not just outside but within the walls of an unassuming house. A house with too many eyes but no faces. They settled their bill, unaware that this simple act was their final step toward an ordinary world. Beyond this point, the landscape of their lives would twist and writhe, as mutable and treacherous as the tales that filled the bar's murky air. Gathering their jackets, they stepped out into the night, their footsteps in rhythm with their pulsing hearts. Each beat a drum roll leading them closer to a story of their own, a story that was waiting to be written in the ink of their fears and curiosities. And so, under the shroud of a moonless night, they made their way to the mansion known only as the House of Eyes, their laughter fading into the wind, swallowed by the trees that stood like sentinels, guarding a secret that was never meant to be unearthed. The rusty door of the bar swung closed behind them, as if concluding its chapter in their tale, sealing them into the narrative of a night that would test the very fabric of their realities. The journey to the House of Eyes was marked by a chilling silence that lay thick over the town. The usually raucous nightlife of insects and nocturnal creatures was eerily muted, as if even nature sensed the unseen boundary the friends were about to cross. Trees loomed like ancient guardians, their limbs contorted into shapes that seemed to signal caution, and the wind carried a moist, earthy scent that hinted at years of untold secrets decaying in hidden corners. As they turned the final bend of the narrow, gravel road, their eyes fell upon it, the mansion. It stood as a relic against the backdrop of the night sky, as if suspended between the realms of the living and the dead. Olivia quickly unslung her camera from around her neck, its shutter clicking to capture the house's haunting facade. It doesn't look so terrifying, Olivia observed, staring at her camera's LCD screen where the image was now frozen, its haunting atmosphere confined within the boundaries of pixels. Yeah, said Mark, it's just an old building, probably full of rats and rotted wood. Nathan pulled out a flashlight from his backpack and pointed it towards the front door. Let's do this. Remember, we stick together. Sophia nodded, her eyes betraying a mixture of excitement and trepidation. A psychological experiment in fear, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Nathan pried open the rusty gate, and it screeched in defiance, as if unhappy to be disturbed after years of solitude. They crossed the threshold of the garden, its unkempt foliage reaching out like arms attempting to snag their clothes. When they reached the front door, Nathan hesitated for a moment before pushing it open. It groaned in protest, but finally gave way. Inside, the air was thick with the musty aroma of mildew and aging fabric. Cobwebs veiled the ceiling, and the wooden floors creaked in agony under the weight of their steps. Olivia was entranced by the atmosphere, her camera clicking away as she tried to capture every decayed chandelier and tarnished silver frame. For a moment, it seemed like they had all been wrong. The house was just a house, empty and decaying, lifeless. But then Mark noticed a door partially obscured by an old, frayed curtain. Hey, have you guys noticed this? They all moved towards it, their flashlights converging on the doorway. It looks like it leads to the basement, Sophia observed. Nathan took a deep breath. All right, let's check it out. The steps to the basement moaned under their feet as they descended. The walls here were made of cold, damp stone, and their flashlights barely penetrated the shroud of darkness that seemed to drink the light. Mark, ever the curious one, was the first to notice the irregularities on the wall. What is that? His voice trembled. His flashlight beam focused, revealing what seemed at first to be a mere pattern on the wall, but as they all looked closer, it became terrifyingly clear. The wall was adorned with human eyes, each one set into the stone as if it were a grotesque piece of art. Eyes of every color and size stared back at them, lifeless yet inexplicably full of emotion, anger, sorrow, fear. Oh my God, Olivia gasped. Her camera hung limp around her neck, forgotten. Even her adventurous spirit couldn't rationalize this. Sophia stepped back, her academic intrigue shattered by the grotesque reality. This is beyond any psychological experiment. This is something else. Nathan, his face pale, managed to stammer, "We need to get out. Now." But before anyone could move, before they could turn away from the dreadful spectacle, it happened. Every eye, each one embedded into the wall as if an integral part of the house itself, blinked, in unison, as though agreeing on something unspeakable. The darkness seemed to deepen around them, swallowing their screams before they could escape their lips. It was then they realized, with heart-stopping clarity, that they were no longer visitors in this house. They were part of it, and the eyes, myriad and haunting, had claimed them as their own. The room felt suddenly colder, as if the walls had exhaled a chilling breath, making the atmosphere dense with a different kind of dark. Each friend stood frozen, pinned in place by the unblinking gaze of the countless eyes surrounding them. Even the beams from their flashlights seemed dimmer, unable to contend with the heavy shadows. Mark broke the silence first. Guys, are we sure these are, real? Couldn't it just be some sort of installation? Some artist getting edgy? Sophia blinked, as if coming out of a trance. An installation? In a place like this? You're stretching, Mark. Am I? Mark defended. Remember those weird sculptures we saw downtown? Art can be pretty bizarre. Olivia lifted her camera hesitantly. Only one way to find out. Her finger hesitated over the shutter, and then she took a series of photographs, hoping to capture some detail that might explain away the horror before them. Nathan frowned but seemed willing to grasp at any reasonable explanation. All right, if this is someone's twisted idea of art, there should be more installations, right? Let's keep looking. Gathering their wits and their courage, they exited the basement, each footstep echoing as if the house itself were measuring their fear. As they returned to the main floor, the door behind them clicked shut. No one seemed to notice. Their flashlights flicked from room to room, revealing Victorian furniture covered in dust, more cobwebs, and faded portraits of unsmiling faces. It was an eerie gallery of times long past. Olivia took photos sporadically, the camera's flash cutting through the gloom like a knife. Sophia led them into what appeared to be a dining room. Here, too, a wall caught their attention. More eyes, but these seemed angrier, more accusatory. Mark gulped audibly, his earlier skepticism eroding with each new revelation. They continued their uneasy exploration, entering a room that must have once been a nursery, judging by the dilapidated crib and time-worn toys. Again, another wall of eyes. But these eyes seemed to hold a deep sadness, like lost souls crying out from some forgotten purgatory. Behind them, the door softly clicked shut, its sound drowned by their breathing, which had become shallow and hurried. It was Sophia who first noticed the disturbing pattern. Have you all realized that every door we've passed through has locked behind us? Panic edged into Nathan's voice. Let's double back. Try to force one open. They rushed to the door they had just entered through, Nathan and Mark throwing their weight against it. It refused to budge, as though sealed by an unseen hand. The room felt like it was closing in on them, the walls almost pulsating with a sinister life force. Wait, Olivia's voice was tinged with disbelief as she reviewed her camera's photos. Look at this. She showed them a photograph of Sophia standing before the wall of sad eyes. But there, behind her, was a shadowy figure, almost blending into the darkness, but distinctly human-shaped, its outline captured by the camera's flash. Sophia felt her skin crawl, as if the figure were still lurking behind her. What is that? Mark stared at the image, his eyes wide. That's not a trick of the light. That's something else. For a heart-stopping second, they all felt it, the weight of invisible eyes upon them, unseen yet intensely felt. It was as though the shadow in the photograph had given substance to their escalating fear, transforming it into something malevolent, something that lurked in the dark corners of the room, waiting. And it was that terrifying moment of realization that glued them to where they stood, each wondering if the eyes on the walls were simply the beginning, an unveiling of a deeper, darker horror that had yet to reveal itself. Nathan's flashlight scanned the room, dancing over the time-worn furniture, the faded wallpaper, and a tall, imposing bookshelf that looked curiously out of place. It was as though the room had been holding its breath for decades, waiting for this very moment. Nathan approached the bookshelf, fascinated by the array of ancient texts and yellowing novels. Over here, he said, motioning for the others to come see. His hand hesitated above a leather-bound volume before pulling it toward him. As he did, there was a grinding noise, and the entire bookshelf creaked as it revealed a hidden door. Olivia captured the surreal moment through her lens, preserving it as though fearing it would slip away as some forgotten dream. The hidden door led to a room that seemed to murmur with forgotten voices. It was filled with personal belongings, trinkets, clothing, and a desk overwhelmed by diaries and sketches. The room felt sadder than the rest, its very air saturated with the weight of untold stories. Mark picked up a driver's license from the desk. Guys, look at this. It's dated 20 years ago. This person is one of the missing. Sophia reached for one of the diaries, its pages tinged with age, and began to read aloud. I can't tell if they watch me for my benefit or theirs. They see everything, every tear, every smile. It's as if they feed off our emotions. I tried talking to them today. Her voice trailed off, captured by the palpable sense of dread that drenched each written word. These weren't just relics, they were desperate messages from people who had vanished, swallowed whole by the house and its ever-watchful eyes. Nathan looked at Sophia, his face flushed with a new understanding. This is not art, Mark. These are lives, people who walked into this place and never walked out. Mark swallowed hard, his earlier bravado crumpled under the burden of reality. We need to find a way out. Now, Sophia gently closed the diary, her fingers lingering on the cover as though to absorb its hidden tales. That's when it happened, a whisper, so faint it was almost drowned by the sound of her own heartbeat. It said her name, Sophia, like a breath exhaled in the dark. She froze, her eyes searching the room, praying to catch sight of a draft, an open window, any rational explanation. But the room offered none, and the name echoed in her ears as a haunting reminder of the mysteries that still lay hidden within the house's suffocating walls. The room seemed to hold its breath as Sophia's whispered name still hung in the air. Mark, trying to break the tension, started fiddling with his tech gear. "I can't get any signal in here," he finally muttered, both fascinated and terrified by the mansion's capacity to isolate them from the outside world. Nathan, still in leader mode, surveyed the room. His gaze fell on a complex series of levers and gears mounted on the wall, mostly hidden behind a tattered curtain. A look of determination settled over him. "We need answers, and it seems like they're hidden behind these walls." Pulling the levers required force, as though the house resisted surrendering its secrets. With a final heave from Nathan, there was a clunking sound and the wall slid aside, revealing yet another hidden chamber. This one was different. The atmosphere was dense, and the room felt like a sacred space, violated by their presence. An altar stood in the center, covered with ancient symbols and ceremonial tools, daggers, chalices, and a large, leather-bound book that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Olivia felt a shiver crawl up her spine as she aimed her camera at the altar. Even her lens seemed hesitant to capture this moment. Sophia, always the brave one, opened the book. "It's in Latin," she said, "but there are notes in the margin." Someone translated some of it. She read aloud, "A pact with the Ancient One. Immortality granted in exchange for souls, fed through the eyes of watchfulness." Mark's face drained of color. So, the eyes on the walls, they're not just some twisted art. They're conduits feeding an ancient entity with our emotions, our souls. Everyone turned to look at Nathan, who clenched his fists and shook his head in disbelief. "No, this can't be. We need to get out of here. We need to." His words were cut off by a deafening sound, like the groan of the earth itself. It echoed through the chamber, followed by a sickening silence. Olivia rushed to a window, her breaths coming out in shallow gasps. "Guys, the windows, they're not windows anymore. It's like they've turned into stone walls." As her words settled, the room seemed to tighten around them, as though the house itself was constricting. The atmosphere became stifling, each breath a labor. It was as if the house had sealed its lips after sharing its grotesque secret, leaving them entombed in its dark, unfathomable belly. Desperation filled the air like thick fog as they returned to the chamber, the altar's presence a silent testament to the horrors surrounding them. Nathan's jaw was set, eyes narrowed. "We need to split up. Maybe one of us can find a way out." Sophia looked concerned. "Isn't that what every doomed character says in horror stories?" Nathan's voice rose in frustration. "Do we look like we're in a story? This is real, Sophia, and we need real solutions." And so they dispersed, each taking a different hallway leading out from the chamber. Olivia's footsteps were hesitant, the once adventurous photography major now gripped by the enormity of the situation. She found herself in a room wallpapered in hazy, nostalgic images, pictures of her and Nathan in happier times. Her heart sank. Then the images twisted. Nathan's face in the photos contorted into sinister expressions, accusing her with his eyes. Olivia trembled, her camera slipping from her fingers. Did he suspect her? Did he think she led them into this trap? Meanwhile, Mark was grappling with his own demons. His room was an unsettling replica of his childhood bedroom, replete with old computers and gaming consoles. But the screens flickered to life, showcasing his deepest insecurities in flashing pixels, words like failure, fraud, and alone repeated endlessly. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his head as if he could hold his unraveling sanity together. Sophia, who had delved into studying the psychology of fear, was now the subject of her own chilling case study. The room she entered was a mirror maze, except each reflection whispered taunts and accusations, making her question her grip on reality. Is this what you wanted, Sophia? A psychological experiment? One of the reflections jeered. Nathan, retracing their steps, felt a weight on his mind, each room imbued with a rising suspicion that Olivia knew more than she let on. When he reached the initial wall of eyes, for the first time, he noticed that a pair of them resembled Olivia's. His eyes widened in disbelief and betrayal. Finally, it was Mark who stumbled upon the most unnerving room yet. This chamber contained another wall of eyes, but these eyes were different. As he peered closer, his blood froze. These were his own eyes, mirroring his deepest fears back at him, a vivid display of every nightmare he'd ever had, every terror he'd ever suppressed. His scream resonated through the mansion, a raw sound that ripped through the veil of distrust and dread that had fallen over each of them. And in that moment, all knew that the house was succeeding in what it did best, turning them, irrevocably, against one another. Silence settled over them as they reconvened in the mansion's main hall, the grandeur of which had been twisted into a mockery of its former elegance. The ornate chandeliers now dripped with a substance too dark to be wax, and the formerly lush carpet felt like cold, damp earth underfoot. They looked at each other, their faces etched with raw emotion, fear, guilt, suspicion. Even in their eyes, the closest windows to their souls, a shadow had crept in. Nathan broke the silence, his voice grave. "We're running out of time. We need to break this pact, whatever it is." Mark, recovering from his terrifying ordeal, shook his head. "How do you suggest we do that?" Nathan hesitated, searching for the right words. I think it feeds on fear. When we were scared, it seemed to grow stronger." Sophia nodded, her expertise in psychology suddenly invaluable. "Fear can be a powerful fuel. So, what if we could starve it?" Olivia took a shaky breath. "And how do we do that?" Nathan sighed, pulling the ancient book they'd discovered earlier from his backpack. This book mentioned counter-rituals. If we can master our fears, we might be able to disrupt the energy feeding this entity. With a newfound sense of purpose, they gathered in a circle around the book, which lay open on a dusty table. A counter-ritual was chosen, one designed to repel malevolent entities by channeling inner strength and courage. They took positions around the room, each clutching an object of personal significance as a focus for the ritual. Together, they began to chant the incantation, their voices joining in a desperate plea to forces beyond their understanding. They closed their eyes, each battling inner demons, striving to replace their fear with thoughts of courage, love, and resolve. Minutes stretched on. The atmosphere felt as if it were thickening, almost holding its breath. And then, just when they thought they might have succeeded, they opened their eyes. The eyes on the walls glared back at them, brighter than ever before. But now, something was horrifyingly different. They glowed an ominous red, as if aflame from within. It was a signal, a malevolent acknowledgement. The ritual had failed, and the house, no, the entity, was ready to claim what it considered rightfully its own. The air in the main hall was thick with tension and a sense of impending doom. The glowing red eyes that adorned the walls seemed to pulsate, as if feeding on the group's collective despair. "We need to do something, and fast," Nathan said, his eyes darting from face to face, each one a tableau of dread. "Any ideas?" Mark, visibly shaken but still able to think, stuttered, "What if? What if we can't escape the house, but can blind the entity? Those eyes are its conduits, right?" Sophia caught on immediately. "We destroy the eyes, we starve the entity of its senses. And maybe," Olivia chimed in, "just maybe, the house will let us go." With a collective nod, they sprinted towards the basement, each step heavy with the weight of their desperate plan. As they descended the stairs, the atmosphere grew increasingly suffocating, and they felt as if they were intruding upon some unholy sanctuary. There it was, the first wall of eyes they'd discovered, still as unnerving as the first time they saw it. But now, the eyes were aflame with an otherworldly fire, glowing with malevolence. Each eye seemed to bore into them, pulling their fears to the surface. But this time, they were ready. Armed with whatever they could find, hammers, shards of broken furniture, even their own fists, they unleashed upon the eyes. Every smashed eye was a symbolic defeat of their own fears, a cathartic release of the terror that had consumed them. And the house responded. The walls trembled, sending vibrations through the floor that rattled their bones. Cracks snaked across the walls and ceiling like tendrils, as if the house itself were shrieking in agony. And then, as abruptly as it started, it stopped. One of the cracks in the wall widened, splintering to form an aperture, like a wound, revealing a glimpse of the outside world. They scrambled through the opening, gasping for air as if breaking the surface of dark waters. And when they finally stood outside, beneath the comforting veil of the night sky, they knew they had escaped, at least for now. Days later, Olivia reviewed the photographs she had taken, each one a chilling memento of their harrowing experience. But it was the final photograph that made her heart stop. There, behind the smiling faces of her friends, were the walls of the now abandoned mansion. And on those walls, barely visible but unmistakably there, were the outlines of eyes, reforming, rejuvenating, preparing for the next cycle. The House of Eyes had lost its vision momentarily, but it was far from blind. And somewhere in the darkest corners of reality, it continued to watch, to wait, and to hunger. We've emerged from the catacombs of the House of Eyes, but remember, dear listeners, some doors, once opened, can never truly be shut again. The eyes may fade, but they never really disappear. They linger in the corners of your room, in the shadows of your mind. If tonight's tale has unsettled you, then we've done our duty. But rest easy, or at least try to. We'll be back with more stories to rattle the very marrow in your bones. Until then, sleep with one eye open, as you never know what might be watching. This is our Scary Stories signing off for tonight.